Morning sunlight spilled gently across the city streets as crowds hurried to their destinations. Office workers, students, vendors setting up their stalls, and people lost in their own struggles. The world moved fast, almost too fast for anyone to notice anyone else. Amid this rush, on a worn-out wooden bench near the corner bakery, sat Daniel, a homeless man whose clothes had faded and whose face carried the weight of years of hardship, yet even in his tired eyes, a quiet gentleness remained, a softness life had not managed to steal. Daniel rubbed his hands together for warmth. It was early, and the cold always hit hardest before the day's bustle brought heat to the pavement. He scanned the street, not with bitterness, but with a kind of silent hope that maybe today would be different. Maybe a stranger would offer a warm drink, maybe he would find a small job to earn a meal, but mostly he hoped for just a moment of kindness, something he rarely received. Just a few steps away, a man in a tailored navy blue suit rushed out of a taxi. His name was Mr. Carter, a well-known businessman always seen with polished shoes, a leather briefcase, and the air of someone who never had time to spare. He glanced at his watch, already running late for an important meeting. In his haste, he didn't notice that as he stepped out of the cab, his wallet slid from his pocket and fell onto the sidewalk. Dozens of people walked by, shoes of every kind, heels, sneakers, boots, passed inches away from the fallen wallet. Some nearly stepped on it, others saw it but assumed someone else would pick it up. A few noticed, but the idea of helping simply didn't cross their minds. Everyone was too busy, too occupied, too disconnected. Daniel's eyes caught the glint of the leather. At first he wondered if he was imagining it. Slowly he leaned forward and picked up the wallet, brushing dust off of it with care. It was heavy, much heavier than any wallet he had held in years. When he opened it, he froze. Inside were stacks of crisp bills, credit cards, business cards, and a driver's license. It was enough money to feed him for months, enough to change his life overnight. For a long moment, Daniel simply stared at it. His stomach growled, a painful reminder that he hadn't eaten since yesterday afternoon. He closed his eyes, letting out a long breath. Hunger had a way of testing a person's values, but Daniel had always believed that hardship was not an excuse to lose yourself. He tightened the wallet in his hands and looked down the street, trying to remember the face of the man who had just gotten out of the taxi. He could barely recall the details, but he remembered one thing. The man looked like he was in a hurry. People in a hurry often drop things without noticing, and if he lost this much money, it could be serious. Daniel stood up from the bench for the first time in an hour. His knees cracked slightly. Sleeping on hard concrete did that to a person. He walked toward a nearby lamppost, one that gave him a clear view of the street in both directions. If the man realized his loss, he would surely return this way. Minutes passed. People stared at Daniel holding the wallet. Some whispered. He ignored them. He had made his choice. A mother tugged her child away as they walked past him, as if fearing he would take something from them. Two teenagers snickered, pointing at him, but Daniel simply leaned back against the lamppost, patient and calm. He whispered to himself, "Whoever owns this, they must be worried. I just have to wait." His hands shook, not from cold this time, but from the weight of responsibility. It would have been so easy to slip away with the money. No one would know, no one would care, but Daniel would know, and that mattered more than anything in the wallet. As the morning grew busier, Daniel kept scanning the street, hoping to see the man in the navy blue suit return, unaware that this simple decision, to do the right thing even when no one was watching, was about to change his life in ways he never imagined. Daniel sat quietly on the cold bench, the lost wallet resting in his trembling hands. His clothes were worn, his beard untrimmed, and his fingers stiff from the morning chill. Anyone passing by could see that life had not been kind to him, but in that moment, his focus was not on himself. It was on doing the right thing. He kept glancing at the corner from where the businessman had rushed earlier, hoping he would return. But the world around him rarely slowed down to appreciate kindness. The first group that noticed Daniel was a pair of young men holding takeaway coffees. One of them nudged the other and snickered. "Look at that. Bet he's counting how much he can take before he disappears," he whispered loudly enough for Daniel to hear. The other laughed, holding up his phone to record. "Bro, this is going viral. Homeless guy steals wallet in broad daylight." Daniel's shoulders stiffened. He wanted to explain, but knew it would only add fuel to their mockery. Over the years he had learned that sometimes staying silent said more about your character than defending yourself to those who didn't want to understand. Still, their laughter cut deeper than they realized. Minutes passed, and a woman approached, her heels clicking sharply against the pavement. She stopped directly in front of Daniel, folded her arms, and frowned. "So this is where my tax money goes? Waiting for people to lose things so you can grab them?" she snapped. Daniel lifted his head slowly and replied in a gentle voice, "Ma'am, I didn't take anything. I'm just waiting for the man who dropped this." The woman scoffed dismissively and walked away. "Yeah, right, they always have a story." Her words stung more than the cold wind. Daniel sighed and tightened his grip on the wallet, not with greed but with responsibility. He knew the wallet held important documents. Losing them would cause the owner distress, and although society saw him as nothing more than a burden, he still saw himself as someone capable of doing good. Another passerby, a middle-aged man in a suit, slowed down as he noticed the scene. "Hey!" he barked. "Did you take that from someone? Put it down before I call security." Daniel stood up quickly, shaking his head. "No, sir, I'm just—" But the man didn't stay long enough to listen. He muttered angrily and walked away, shaking his head as if he had just witnessed a crime. The judgments came in waves, looks of disgust, whispers, accusations. Some people crossed the street to avoid him, others stayed only long enough to take a photo or video. Not one person asked what truly happened. Except one. A soft voice spoke behind him. "Are you okay?" Daniel turned and saw a young woman with warm eyes and a gentle expression. She wasn't recording, she wasn't judging. She was simply caring. "I'm fine," Daniel replied quietly. "Just waiting for someone." She noticed the wallet and the way Daniel handled it, with care, not ownership. "Did someone drop it?" she asked. Daniel nodded. "Yes. A businessman. He looked like he was in a hurry. I think he'll come back for it." The woman smiled kindly and handed him a paper bag. "Here, I brought you a sandwich and tea. You look like you haven't eaten in a while." Daniel hesitated. "I don't want you to think I'm taking anything." "I don't," she said softly. "Your eyes don't look like someone who wants to steal. They look like someone who's trying to do what's right, even when the world doesn't see it." Her words eased something heavy inside Daniel's chest. It had been a long time since someone looked at him with compassion instead of suspicion. As she sat beside him, the crowd's whispers softened. Some people who had mocked him earlier stopped to observe and felt a quiet discomfort as they realized their assumptions might have been wrong. "Do you want me to stay until the owner comes back?" she offered. Daniel shook his head with a faint smile. "No, thank you. I'll be all right. I've waited longer for other things in life." The woman nodded, touched by his humility. Before leaving, she said, "I hope whoever lost that wallet understands what kind of man found it." Daniel watched her walk away, holding the warm tea she had given him. He felt a renewed strength, not from the drink but from the reminder that kindness still existed in the world. Yet the contrast was clear. Where many saw a thief, only one saw a human being. And as more people continued to judge him without knowing the truth, Daniel remained seated, patiently guarding the wallet. Not because he expected a reward, but because doing the right thing mattered more than what anyone thought of him. Little did the crowd know, the man who owned that wallet was already on his way back, and what was about to happen would change everything. The businessman, Mr. Adrian Cole, was still several blocks away when panic finally overtook him. The moment he reached into his jacket pocket and felt nothing but lining, his heart dropped. His wallet, holding not only several $100s, but his company credit cards, IDs, his daughter's photo, and a contract he needed for the next morning, was gone. He froze on the sidewalk, pressing a hand to his forehead as he struggled to breathe. "How could I be so careless?" he muttered to himself, his voice shaking with frustration. People around him kept moving, barely noticing a grown man spiraling into distress. Adrian turned sharply and began rushing back the way he had come, retracing every step with a knot in his chest. His polished shoes echoed loudly against the pavement, his expensive watch glinting under the afternoon sun, but all he could think of was the irreplaceable items inside that wallet. Meanwhile, back near the bench, Daniel, the homeless man who had been waiting for almost an hour, kept glancing up and down the street. His thin fingers tapped nervously on the wallet sitting safely on his lap. The stares, whispers, and judgment from earlier still stung, but he refused to move until the owner appeared. Just then he spotted a man half running, half stumbling toward him, scanning the ground with desperate eyes. The man's suit jacket flew behind him like a frantic flag. Daniel immediately sat up straighter. This must be him. Adrian stopped right in front of the bench, panting heavily, his forehead glistening with sweat. Daniel held the wallet carefully in both hands. "Sir," he said quietly, "are you looking for this?" Adrian's head snapped up. His eyes widened, not in relief at first, but in disbelief. Standing before him was a disheveled man with worn-out clothes, a ripped jacket, and hands that looked like they had weathered a lifetime of hardship. But then he saw the wallet. My wallet," Adrian whispered, stepping forward. His voice cracked. "Where did you... How?" Daniel extended it gently, almost respectfully, like he was handing over something sacred. "You dropped it when you walked by earlier. I've been waiting for you to come back." Adrian grabbed the wallet and immediately opened it with trembling hands. His eyes darted across the bills, still there, his ID cards, untouched. Even the tiny Polaroid of his daughter remained exactly where he kept it. Nothing was out of place. He swallowed hard, shaken. "It's all here," he whispered, as if he couldn't believe it. Around them, a few of the same passers-by from earlier had paused again, watching the scene unfold. Those who had recorded Daniel, assuming he was a thief, now exchanged awkward glances. Adrian looked up at Daniel, truly seeing him for the first time, not as a homeless figure hunched on a bench, but as someone who had chosen honesty over opportunity, integrity over need. "You could have taken everything," Adrian said quietly. "There's more than enough in here to help someone in your situation." Daniel nodded slowly. "I know. And you didn't take a single dollar." Daniel's voice was steady, but soft. "It wasn't mine." Adrian stared at him for a long moment. Something in Daniel's eyes, tired yet calm, disarmed him completely. "But why?" Adrian asked, unable to understand. "Most people wouldn't have resisted, especially when they're struggling." Daniel looked down at his hands, then back at Adrian. "Because doing the right thing is all I have left. Money comes and goes. But your character..." He placed a hand over his chest. "That's the one thing no one can steal." The sincerity of those words hit Adrian harder than any financial loss ever could. He felt a wave of guilt rise in his chest. Guilt for judging him at first glance. Guilt for letting society convince him that people like Daniel were somehow less trustworthy. People around them grew silent, listening. Even the woman who had earlier defended Daniel smiled softly, her eyes shining as she watched the moment unfold. Adrian took a deep breath. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. "You've shown more honesty than most people I've met in boardrooms." Daniel gave a small shrug, but there was a fragile pride in his expression. "Just glad it got back to you." But Adrian shook his head. "No," he said firmly, "this deserves more than a thank you." And though Daniel didn't know it yet, that moment marked the turning point. For Adrian, for the crowd, and most of all, for Daniel himself. Because what Adrian would do next would shock everyone standing there, and change Daniel's life forever. The businessman, Mr. Harrington, stood frozen for a moment, clutching his recovered wallet as if trying to understand what had just happened. Around him, people who had moments earlier mocked Daniel now fell into an embarrassed silence. The street noise seemed to fade into the background. All eyes were on the homeless man who had done what many, even with comfortable lives, might not have done. Daniel lowered his gaze shyly, unsure of what to expect. He had done the right thing, nothing more, nothing less. He wasn't waiting for praise or reward. Returning the wallet felt natural to him, like a responsibility he owed to himself and the world. But the intensity in Mr. Harrington's eyes made him uneasy. "Sir, your wallet," Daniel repeated quietly, as if reminding the man it was already returned. Mr. Harrington finally found his voice. "Everything is here," he murmured, flipping through the cash, cards, and documents with disbelief. "You didn't take anything?" Daniel gently shook his head. "It wasn't mine to take." That simple sentence struck deeper than any long speech could. Some of the crowd shifted awkwardly. The woman who had offered Daniel food earlier smiled proudly. A man who had accused him of stealing looked at the ground, ashamed. Mr. Harrington stepped closer. "Can I ask, why? You could have walked away with all of this. No one would have known." His voice was soft, genuinely curious. Daniel hesitated, then replied with quiet strength. "People see me and think I've got nothing left, but I still have one thing, my integrity. If I lose that, then I'm truly homeless." Mr. Harrington stared at him with a mixture of admiration and compassion. Something in him shifted. He saw not a homeless man, but a human being who had survived hardship without letting it destroy his principles. The businessman took a slow breath. "What's your name?" "Daniel," he answered. "Well, Daniel," Mr. Harrington said, "you just reminded me of something I forgot long ago. That wealth isn't measured by what we have, but by who we are." A murmur passed through the crowd. People began to sense something meaningful was about to happen. Mr. Harrington looked around at the spectators, then back at Daniel. "You said this wasn't yours to take, but maybe your life as it is now isn't what you deserve either." Daniel blinked, confused. "Sir, come with me," Mr. Harrington said. "I want to do something for you. Not because you returned the wallet, but because someone like you shouldn't be abandoned by society." Daniel stepped back, unsure. Too many promises in his life had been broken. Too many times hope had betrayed him. I don't know." Mr. Harrington's voice softened. "I'm not offering charity. I'm offering a chance." Those words hit Daniel differently. A chance, not pity, not a handout, a chance. After a long pause, Daniel nodded. Moments later, Mr. Harrington called his driver and instructed him to take Daniel to a nearby hotel. He arranged a room for Daniel, new clothes, food, and even medical checkups. The staff looked skeptical at first, but quickly changed their attitude when they saw the respect with which Mr. Harrington treated Daniel. Over the next week, Daniel's transformation was remarkable. Freshly shaved, well-dressed, and finally sleeping in a warm bed, he looked like a completely different man. But more importantly, he felt different. He regained something he had lost long ago, dignity. One morning, Mr. Harrington arrived with paperwork in his hand. "I've got something for you," he said. Daniel's heart raced. "What is it?" "A job," Mr. Harrington replied, smiling. "In my company, and an apartment close to the office. You've shown more honesty than half the people I interview. I need someone like you." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. For a moment he struggled to speak. I don't know how to thank you." "You already did," Mr. Harrington said. "You taught everyone watching today that kindness doesn't depend on wealth. It depends on the heart." Daniel finally felt hope, not borrowed or imagined, but real hope that came from being seen, respected, and given a chance to stand again. As he walked into his new life, the moral echoed powerfully, "Never judge someone by their circumstances. A person's true worth is found not in their pockets, but in their character."